Last August, my backyard looked like burnt toast. Crispy, brown, dead from edge to edge. I'd been spraying the synthetic stuff for 30 years, and that summer it just gave up on me. So I went back to a mix my dad used in Iowa in 1972. 4 ingredients, all from a grocery store, none of them on any fertilizer shelf today. 11 days later, the Bermuda was green again. Not recovering green. Green like June. Here's the thing. This tonic used to be in almost every county extension pamphlet in the Midwest. Then sometime around 1978 it disappeared. I'll show you why, I'll show you the mix, and stay with me because there's one ingredient most folks leave out, and it's the one that does most of the work. Here's the thing. The authority that buried this tonic wasn't a single villain in a boardroom. It was an industry and an institution moving in the same direction at the same time. ChemLawn was founded in 1968 in Ohio, and by 1977, they'd scaled to a national operation with trucks in driveways across the Midwest. Their competitors followed. And right around that same window, the Cooperative Extension Service. The same offices that used to hand out plain paper pamphlets with homemade recipes on them started reorganizing their lawn care publications around bagged, branded NPK products from named manufacturers. I know this because my dad kept his. I've still got a 1972 Iowa State University Extension pamphlet he picked up at the county office in Story County. Page 7 of that pamphlet lists the 4-ingredient tonic I'm about to show you, with quantities, with mixing instructions, with a recommended application schedule. Page 7. By 1980, the same office's pamphlets had dropped it entirely. The new versions listed bagged synthetic programs by brand name and pound per 1,000 square feet rates. That's an 8-year window where a working homemade recipe got walked out the back door of the Extension Service. I asked the turf specialist at my local Extension office about it a few years back. She confirmed the shift, not as a secret, just as a fact of how the literature evolved. Homemade tonics couldn't be standardized. They couldn't be certified. They couldn't be sold by the bag. So 2 generations of homeowners got trained to spend $200 to $400 a season on synthetic programs that build shallow roots and chemical dependency when a $6 grocery store tonic delivered the same green-up. That wasn't a conspiracy in a dark room. It was institutional drift driven by what could be sold. All right, let's walk through it together. Here's the recipe, and I want you to write this down because it's exactly the same proportions my dad used in 1972, and exactly what I poured into my sprayer last August. Per 1 gallon of concentrate, you're using 4 things. 1 12-ounce can of flat regular beer. Cheap stuff, the cheaper the better, and let it sit open overnight so the carbonation is gone. 1 cup of clear household ammonia, the 3% solution you buy in the laundry aisle for about $2 a jug. 1/4 cup of non-antibacterial liquid dish soap. Dawn Original is what I use, and the antibacterial versions will kill the very soil microbes you're trying to feed, so read the label. And 1 cup of blackstrap molasses. I'll come back to that molasses at the end, because it's the ingredient that does most of the work. But for now, just get it in the jug. You mix that gallon of concentrate, you pour it into a 20-gallon hose end sprayer, and you spray it across 2,500 to 3,000 square feet of lawn. 1 gallon of concentrate, 1 application. You do this every 3 weeks during the active growing season. That's it. Before you spray a drop of it, you put on nitrile gloves and ANSI safety goggles. Ammonia in your eyes will ruin your day. Read the label on the ammonia jug. I've been spraying for 30 years, and I have never once not worn my PPE on camera or off. Don't skip it. Now, most homeowners get this wrong because they look at that ingredient list and they think, that can't possibly work. It's groceries. And that's exactly the kind of reaction the bagged fertilizer aisle was built on. Here's why it works. The ammonia is your immediate nitrogen source. Household ammonia is NH3, ammonia gas dissolved in water. When it hits moist soil, it converts to NH4+, ammonium, which is the form plant roots actually take up. That's not chemistry I made up. That's the same nitrogen reaction happening inside every bag of synthetic urea fertilizer on the shelf at the big box store. The difference is, you just paid $2 for the jug instead of $40 for the bag. The beer is doing two things. The residual sugars and the yeast feed the soil microbes, the bacteria and the fungi living in your root zone. And beer carries B vitamins, particularly thiamine, that act as a biostimulant on stressed turf. Yeast plus sugar plus B vitamins is essentially a microbial smoothie. You're not feeding the grass with the beer. You're feeding the workforce underneath the grass. The dish soap is the piece almost nobody understands. When your lawn is dry and dormant and brown, the soil becomes hydrophobic. Water beads off it instead of soaking in. You've seen this. You water for an hour and the top inch is wet and the rest is bone dry. That's hydrophobic soil. The soap is a surfactant. It breaks the surface tension so the mix actually penetrates down into the root zone instead of running off into the gutter. Without the soap, the other three ingredients never get where they need to go. And the molasses. I'm coming back to that. Just trust me, it's in the jug. That combination is why the green-up is so fast. My backyard last August. Bermuda 419, dormant. Brown edge to edge. Soil temperature hanging around 75 degrees. I sprayed at dusk on a Thursday. By the following Monday, I had green tips. By day 11, the whole backyard was green like June. That's not me selling you anything. That's me standing in my own yard. And it's the same response I saw on lawn number 847 back around 2007, a customer's place that no synthetic program was reviving anymore. I switched him to this Tonic, did 3 applications 3 weeks apart, and his lawn came back. That's the lawn that taught me this works on a property the bagged stuff has given up on. Application timing matters, and this is where most folks ruin it. You apply at dusk, late evening. Not midday, not afternoon, not under direct sun. Here's why. Ammonia is volatile. In direct sunlight on a hot leaf blade, it will burn the foliage right alongside the green-up it's trying to deliver. Dusk gives you cooler temperatures, settled air, and overnight soil contact before the next morning's sun. That alone is the difference between resurrection and a burned-out streak across the front yard. I learned that on lawn number 1 in 1993. Different chemistry, same lesson. Wrong time of day, wrong outcome. Soil temperature is the other variable. For warm season grass, Bermuda, zoysia, St. Augustine, you want soil temp above 65 degrees. That's when the roots are active enough to actually use what you're giving them. For cool season grass, Kentucky bluegrass, fescue, perennial rye, you're applying in spring and fall when soil temps are in the 50s and 60s. And you skip the deep heat of summer because the grass is partly dormant, and you'll push it too hard. And here's the counterintuitive part that almost nobody talks about. This tonic actually works better on warm season grass coming out of heat dormancy than it does on cool season grass. The reason is soil biology. Warm season root systems run deeper. The microbial community in that root zone stays active in heat. And the moment you wake those microbes up with the sugars and the carbon, they pull dormant nutrients into the plant fast. Cool season lawns respond too. They just don't pop the way Bermuda does after sitting brown for 3 weeks. None of this, the timing, the soil temperature, the dusk application, the surfactant chemistry, none of it is in a bag at the big box store. None of it gets you to a checkout counter, which is exactly why it walked out of the extension pamphlets in 1978. Now, before we keep going, I want to tell you about something. Look, I can keep giving you one technique at a time, or I can point you to the full system. What I just showed you is the top-down half. The bottom-up half, how you build the living soil those microbes actually live in, is Chapter 6 of my ebook, Larry's 30-Day Weed Kill Protocol. Chapter 6 is called Building Soil on Top, and it's the layering method that turns dead clay into a microbial home. $17. Head to larrysgardenbooks.com or scan the QR code on screen. If you're watching on the TV, go ahead and grab your phone now. Take your time pulling it up. I'll be right here. This is for folks exhausted by the cycle and ready for a permanent fix. Now let's go back to why this disappeared, because the answer matters. ChemLawn and the competitors that followed couldn't sell a recipe a homeowner could mix from items already in the kitchen. There's no margin in groceries. The whole business model required a product in a bag with a label on it and a dealer network behind it. By 1977, those dealer networks had national reach, and the marketing budgets behind them were larger than every county extension office in the country combined. At the same time, the cooperative extension service was shifting how it published. The new pamphlets favored standardized recommendations, bagged synthetic NPK at specific pound-per-thousand rates that could be measured, certified, and reproduced exactly the same way in every county. A homemade tonic can't be standardized. One brand of molasses isn't quite the same as another. One can of beer has a slightly different yeast residue. From a publishing standpoint, that's a nightmare. From a homeowner standpoint, it doesn't matter. The tonic still works. But the institutions wanted certifiable, and certifiable meant branded. The turf specialist at my extension office confirmed it for me. The shift wasn't a directive. It was the natural drift of an institution that needed reliable, testable recommendations and partnered with manufacturers who could provide them. Now I want to acknowledge the obvious counterargument. Bagged synthetic fertilizer does green up a lawn. That's true. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't. But what it greens up is the blade, not the soil underneath it. You feed the blade grows. 6 weeks later, the synthetic nitrogen has volatilized off and leached down past the root zone, and the lawn dulls out again. So you reapply, and reapply, and reapply. That's the cycle. That's why your neighbor across the street has spent $200 to $400 a season for 40 years and still has the same lawn he had when he started. The real cost wasn't the dollars. It was 40 years of homeowners thinking lawn care required a dealer. All right, here's the ingredient most folks leave out, and it's the one that does the most work. Unsulfured blackstrap molasses. 1 full cup per gallon of concentrate. Not regular molasses, not sorghum, not pancake syrup. Unsulfured blackstrap, the dark, thick stuff in the baking aisle for about $4 a bottle. Molasses is carbon. It's food for the soil bacteria and the mycorrhizal fungi living in your root zone. Those microbes are the workforce that unlocks the dormant nitrogen, the iron, and the trace minerals already sitting in your soil, but bound up in forms the grass can't use. Without molasses, the tonic is just diluted nitrogen and some sugar. With it, you're feeding the underground crew that resurrects the lawn from below. Dr. Nick Christians up at Iowa State University spent his career documenting how soil biology converts inputs into plant-available nutrients. His work on natural turf inputs is the reason I keep molasses in this recipe and won't take it out. Now most modern online versions of this tonic drop the molasses, and the reason is honest enough. It gums up hose end sprayers. Here's the fix. Dissolve the molasses in 2 cups of hot water before you add it to the jug. Flush the sprayer with warm water immediately after you spray. That's it. That's the ingredient buried inside the buried recipe. Before I let you go, if today made you realize you've been fighting this the wrong way the whole time, Chapter 1 of the ebook lays out exactly why. It's called Why Everything You Know About Weeds is Wrong, and it walks through the same post-1970s story I told you tonight, applied to weed control instead of fertilizing. 88 pages. No fluff. Just the protocol. It's the system I wish someone had handed me 20 years ago instead of a bottle of Roundup. Head to larrysgardenbooks.com or scan the QR code on screen. If you're on the TV, go ahead and pull your phone out now. No rush, I'll wait. This isn't another tip, it's the permanent fix. Alright, here's the takeaway. 4 grocery store ingredients, dusk application, and a full cup of unsulfured blackstrap molasses to feed the soil. That's what page 7 of the 1972 pamphlet said. And that's what got buried in 1978. Now you've got it back. Next video I'm walking you through Dr. Christian's other buried discovery, corn gluten meal as a natural pre-emergent. I'll see you in the next one.